RedScare TV is brought to you by comrades like you. Thank you.
If you'd just like to introduce yourself, just give us a brief rundown of your politics. Not necessarily getting into I've already forgotten the fucking phrase. I need to commit this to memory. Tendencies. There we go. Not necessarily getting into particular tendencies or labels, just more like what brought you to your politics and kind of like what things in society you noticed and why socialism was the route you thought could address these.
Well, it's very interesting because my parents at an early age split up. So on my mom's side of the family, it was a very bourgeois family. But then my dad's side of the family, it was a very working class family. So it would be funny because, I go to my mom's house and, everything would be taken care of. We literally always had a stock fridge. At my dad's, we had enough, not like we were starving, but, we had enough. And when the recession hit, that's when I really started to notice, maybe, and I was very young at the time, I'll admit, but I started to question, maybe there's a better thing. And my mom would always take me on business trips, and you'd always see homelessness like you'd never see in my little small town that I come from. I come from the same small town as Caleb Maupin. And, I went to Chicago and just I snuck out of my room while she was out on a board meeting, and I went around and just the sheer amount of homeless people and, the desperation. And I go, is this system really working? So, I started getting into alternative politics. I'd say my real turning point in the left was when I became a self-proclaimed hippie in middle school. I had the really bright clothing. I wore one of those hats that Rastafarians wore, polka shell necklace. And, I really started getting the marks. I was a self-proclaimed Buddhist at the time, Hindu or whatever. And then about later portion of my 8th grade year, so middle school here in America, I picked up a copy of the manifesto at Barnes & Noble, and I just fell in love what he was saying, everything that he was saying. So, I just kept on writing. Then finally, I found the wonders of Google Hangouts. And then all of a sudden I'm talking to people from all over the world. So, at one point, my small little hangout had people from Scotland, Finland, Pakistan, and mostly America. And that's when I really started getting into, debates, what other people are experiencing, and that all around the world, capitalism is just rotten and socialism is the way to go.
I think the most beautiful part that came out of that is the universalness of the idea that no matter where you turn, capitalism is just producing bad outcomes. That you could speak to somebody from Pakistan, America, and Scotland, which are they don't even when the planet is turning, they don't even all face the sun at the same time. Yet right. Capitalism is ubiquitously just producing bad outcomes for the majority of people, and a tiny select elite privileged few seem to have no problems at all.
Right. And another thing I've noticed with the decay of capitalism here in America is I'm just looking at the past 22 years that I've been on this earth. In fact, I'm probably going to be making a documentary that focuses on those past 22 years from the focus of optimism. But what I've noticed is that there's also been a real breaking down of the family. I remember me and my family, because, we'd have more money. So, we'd always, take more time off, go out and do something. But the thing is, my family hasn't really talked to each other in years. And that really kills me. Is, something as sacred as family has been torn apart. And then again, that goes back to the old statement from Marx, I believe, that nothing under capitalism is sacred. Yeah. Even something as, as a family bond is just absolutely torn apart.
Because, that's a tragic word in itself. I think that was a completely unexpected side effect of when you've both members of a family completely alienated. it tears them apart from each other. I fundamentally believe having two working parents in a family just causes an enormous amount of stress and pressure that you need to be incredible human beings to survive that.
Oh yeah, and there are days, and I still talk to my family. I go and see them, but in the end, with the way that social life has just become absolutely political, in the way that we can't see each other in person anymore. It's always these nasty arguments over like Facebook or something, and it's absolutely just torn us apart, especially with the current elections and everything the current political atmosphere since 2016 here in America with Donald Trump, hardlining Republicans and hardlining Democrats in my family both go at it all the time. And it's just, can we just even at Christmas, we have a Christmas party, we can't even get along. It's always something wrong. But the thing is that they're not looking at it that, a lot of these problems are being caused by capitalism. And, these politicians, they're just, puppets for, super PACs, oil companies, lobbyists, or whatever. And, they aren't the issue. It is the economic system, because the economic system is the superstructure of all social life.
Yeah. The dividing household between like Democrats and Republicans, that's literally, like in Ireland, we don't have that. So I find it very difficult to relate, which is why I really appreciate speaking to a lot of Americans in that regard, because it's the closest thing we have in Ireland is like our two biggest parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. That's the bitter split in Irish politics, and that's neoliberal and big tent liberal. That's not a split.
Well, actually, even on both sides of the family, my two main ethnicities that I come from in nationalities is Irish and German. Okay. In fact, from my great grandmother's side, we still have a little bit of contact from family in Northern Ireland. And so, they know, I'm a socialist, they're loyalists. So, which, if you correct me, that is very conservative, correct?
Typically it tends to be, yeah. They fall into... They're very, petty bourgeois, conservative types, so, and I get a little bit of that. I've been looking into the politics of Ireland because I find the struggle there to be very interesting from, James Connolly onward, and, the splitting and whatnot of the IRA into, various factions like the IPLO, the INLA, and all that. So, I wouldn't say a firm grasp, but I'm knowledgeable on what's happening in Ireland. Yeah, I need to sit down with Paul Moran at some point, because he's much more educated in kind of like the development of the IRB to the IRA and then the splits with the struggle in the north. I know what I was told in school, but I know that was practically nothing. But it's
that's just publication. I think that's just public education everywhere. They just give you very brief. It's a very brief summary of what happened. We don't want you to actually learn anything. Just that it happened. Move on. Yeah.
Because from what I've gathered, like one of the major splits in the IRA was between Republicans and socialists, where you had kind of like a hardline ML group basically said that like the initial Republican cause that we have is still incredibly valid, like a society that belongs to the public and is run for the Republic. And then you have another aspect, which is just kind of like more nationalist in its outlook, where they just believe as long as there's an Irish PM, then it's Ireland. And it grew petty bourgeois over time, yeah.
How do you feel about the Brexit? Because I've been hearing words from, not exactly word from, but I've been hearing talk apparently from the IRA saying that if a border wall goes up between Ireland and Northern Ireland, that there's going to be fighting breaking out. How do you feel about that?
My gut feeling is to trust the people who are there, because like I've never been to any of the occupied 6 counties, so I don't want to project what is like a very sheltered southern opinion onto them. I always believe trust the groups in the region themselves. The one thing we've always known is that if the British tried to put up a border wall, the IRA will pick up their arms again, because one of the main reasons they put them down in the first place was because the British kind of agreed to
decommission.
Yeah, it was essentially kind of saying that, hey, we'll look towards maybe reunifying at some point, but we'll just stop putting British soldiers on the street. I always felt like that the IRA decommissioned just because they figured if there weren't armed soldiers on the street, well, then that's that's aiding the struggle. And because they finally had some sort of political representation, they may have been able to just because one of the things that the Good Friday Agreement did, and I know how we feel about electoralism, but this is a unique opportunity. One of the things it did was that if you can get a 50% majority, then it triggers a border poll, which will cause referendums both in the UK and the South. It's almost a unique opportunity for a bloodless solution. So if you can get one, chase it. Brexit all but ends that as a possibility.
And, going back to what you said about a bloodless solution, I feel kind of the same about that. If we can get what we need without, bloodshed, that's great. I feel like too many leftists fetishize violence. I understand in part where the punch Nazis craze was coming from, but in the same instance, you just can't go around punching everyone. Not everyone is down that rabbit hole that they are. You can still probably talk to them. But, I understand what you're saying.
Oh yeah, it's the way that I often put it. Like if I walk up to like a militant Marxist-Leninist and I'd say we should punch Nazis in the face, I'm going to get no critiques at all. But if we're in a room full of liberals, the ML will look at me and say, "Not here." Like, what are you doing? Not here. We're trying to reach these people, not scare them.
Well, and the thing is, they're all about, let's get to the alienated worker until that alienated worker is actually speaking out and putting forth reactionary views because, they don't understand the left. So therefore they're going to go right.
Sorry, say again. I think I got what you meant, but for some reason my mind's just not taking it anywhere.
What I'm saying is a lot of Marxists want to say, well, we need to get to the alienated worker. Well, the thing is the fascists, the conservative, anyone on the right or just really isn't in the movement or isn't a socialist is alienated. They don't understand what they're doing, so they're putting forth these very reactionary views. So to them, the only way we can combat these reactionary views is to punch them. But the thing is if you punch every reactionary, we're going to have no friends. Even Mao Zedong said, I think in 1939, that you need to befriend reactionaries, unite with them, and push them to go forward and to do better. And he won a revolution.
Yeah, I need to read some Mao so that I can properly contextualize what he's saying. But my gut feeling to that is like there's a lot of reactionaries who are just they're following ideology. They're not actually committed to their positions. They don't kind of like in depth understand where they're coming from. They're just they're following the carrot on the stick that's been waved in front of them of like, this will cure your conditions. Elect a strong man and let's just get rid of the foreigner. They're following what they've been told. You can cure that alienation. Like, you can reach that person. The person with the actual carrot and stick, the person leading them, I'm not sure what we can do about them, but I would agree from that perspective that we can't be so quick to write people off. One last thing that I'll put in there is the idea that I feel like we missed a boat at some regard, because like the actual like punching a Nazi in the face, I don't like 100% disagree with that.
I don't either.
Yeah, I just wish people would recognize that like anti-fascist is not the same as reaching the working class. You have to be anti-fascist, but that's its own struggle in itself. You have to combat the far right, and you need groups of people who are trying to reach the working class. Like one of the concepts that I did get from Mao was the concept of the mass line, just like go out to people and ask them what their problems are. That is totally separate from anti-fascist action. And just like, we need to be doing both. We need to be doing as much as we possibly can.
Oh no, I totally agree. I just think, I think the left read one book by a certain communist leader and they're like, oh, I get it. And then they just, put on a red cape over their liberalism and said, I know what I'm doing now. I'm going to go out and change the world. And then, then they slight any other Marxist. For example, I had experience with that side of the left back in 2017. I had written a criticism of a program of a collective down in Austin, Texas. And I admit at the time I used some reactionary anti-transgender language. I didn't know what it was. I thought I was still being positive. but the wording that I used, I regret now. But instead of telling me, oh, you're wrong about this, that, and the third, I got threats to have anthrax sent in my mail.
Yeah.
Like no. Like
you can take you can take somebody aside and say, hey, your language is being transphobic, this is deeply affecting a marginalized group of people, would you like us to kind of like walk you through what you said is wrong? None of that involves threatening to send anthrax in your mail.
It's the thing is what I noticed a few years ago is a lot of people actually went right wing because of how toxic the left wing was becoming. I noticed that a lot of the former people who I weren't exactly friends with, but I associated with, either became self-described National Bolsheviks or Strasserites, the thing that they were being called when they didn't understand something. So, that's just what they became. So.
Yeah. Like Strasserites and National Bolsheviks are things that I need to do a lot more research on, because echoing what you just said there, I hear people being called that more than I hear people explaining what that is.
Well, the thing about National Bolshevism is you can technically argue that it doesn't exist, because the concept of National Bolshevism, since its inception, has changed so much. And the thing is Strasserism, there's two main tendencies between the brother Otto, and I forget the other guys' names, but when most people associate you with a Strasserite, they're talking about Otto Strasser, who really he was an anti-communist. He was a very fervent right-wing nationalist. He believed in basically segregation. It really, the Strasserite and Nazi and National Bolshevik term is just boiled down to another way of calling someone a Nazi without having the actual context of what a Nazi is.
Yeah, because it's like one of the key elements of James Connolly's work in terms of the Irish question was trying to resolve what Irish nationalism was and separate it from kind of like chauvinistic nationalism. What we saw in England with kind of like the rise of kind of like English white supremacy, that was like textbook national chauvinism. Like the Irish national struggle, like a lot of national struggles around the world, as far as I remember, this is one of the things that Stalin identified, was that you can have a liberatory nationalist struggle that doesn't lean right wing. That was
well, and that's what Ho Chi Minh did. That's what Fidel Castro did. And, these people, then it's funny, then they go off and say, I love Ho Chi Minh, I love Fidel Castro, and not realizes that their politics were very nationalist, but in the left leaning sense. They don't understand that. They've really divorced themselves from reality.
It can be at times, yeah. I have a question from chat that I'm not 100% sure how to go about it. It's how do you be around fascists enough to change their views without exposing them to vulnerable people in your social circle? My gut feeling is to go to them rather than bringing them to you. That's my gut feeling to that. Do you have an answer to that one?
Actually, yes. I am friends with a former neo-Nazi turned fascist. And so one of the reasons that I've been able to just bring him down, bring him more left, is because I've talked to him. I've literally gone out, hung out with him, and had beers with him, and just generally chat, not exactly using theoretical jargon, but just go out and chat with him. Granted, he describes himself as an anti-capitalist nationalist. He doesn't believe in Nazism now. He doesn't believe in, per se, fascism. He's still a little bit right-wing. I consider him more of a conservative now. But every time I talk to him, he becomes more and more left-wing. But you do have to go out to them. I would never involve anyone in my group with that.
Yeah.
Because then it can bring down to, you're bringing them into it. So you don't know what the outcome's going to be. You don't know how, if they're going to bring their people with them. It's just go to them, go out to the masses and talk to them.
Yeah. And another benefit to this is that my conversation with the General Line, one of the things that they were talking about was that if you kind of like do a little bit of reconnaissance around your neighborhood and you find people who are right wing, now you know who in your neighborhood you need to keep an eye on and befriend them, chat to them. For all you know that they could have like that. This is one of the things that happens a lot. People might have grown up in a social group where the only people around them were like die-hard Ku Klux Klanners, where that just became the quote unquote norm to them, where they were never shown an alternative disposition, where like having a conversation with them could be enough to begin a process of de-radicalization. That could take months, that could take years, but the point is to like just get them on a conveyor belt out of that disposition, because, and I'd imagine you can speak to this one as well from your experiences of talking to these people, they fall back to a kind of like a comfortable position of kind of like habit. They've just gotten used to thinking this way, and you have to actively encourage them to start thinking about something.
Right, and you see this. In fact, the Ku Klux Klan has I would say somewhere either, I don't know, but somewhere from a minor to a major presence in my county. For example, Lodi, Ohio, not too far from here, it used to house one of the top Ku Klux Klan leaders. I think it was actually the Grand Wizard, whoever it is, the top guy. And then over in Shreve, that's a completely 100% white town. In fact, the rumor is, if you talk to any of them, they'll tell you that they're meeting on the sheriff's gun range at night out in the middle of the swamps. But the thing is when you talk to these people, it always comes back to, well, my daddy said, and then like you're just saying, it's my daddy, well, you have to go into them, because you have to go out to them and talk to them, because a lot of these people live in these small enclaves in which they don't want to see change. They're afraid of change, because the change that has come through here has been absolutely disastrous. It's ruined their town, taken away that one factory that was keeping their town alive. So, they're very jaded, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And it's I just got finished reading a Louis Althusser essay on ideology, and I think this is so important, and I want to reach out to more theory heads to, if they haven't read it, just to help work them through it, because one of the things that's really, really difficult for a lot of people to understand is the idea that in a lot of positions they didn't personally choose to believe those things. The environment around them conditioned them into a to reflexively believe these things. Althusser's idea was that ideology has a material root. You perform your ideology because of the institutions around you, where like the act of going to church in a society that is deeply ideologically Christian, you perform your religion. You don't actually believe any of it. You just you reflexively kind of like rationalize a belief for it, but it's a performance. It's a material performance that you do, and that's a huge part of what ideology is. And exactly like you just said, there's like it's what my daddy told me, because their daddy would have taken them to these meetings, would have spoken about it, would have actively performed a lot of these behaviors. And it's you see it in it's what a lot of sociologists talk about whenever you have like poverty, where like poverty is heritable. If you live in poverty, you'll grow up, and then your children will vicariously experience that poverty through you, because that was your material condition, and it will come through in you and create an ideology around it.
And back to what you're talking about, Lewis, I think you said Althusser. I've heard of him before. I need to read him, but that reminds me of something that a philosopher, actually the father of existentialism, said, Soren Kierkegaard. In his book Fear and Trembling, he's talking about faith from a Christian viewpoint, and I think that we can apply this to any ideology or whatever you do. If you truly have faith in it, you'll go out and do it. For example, he uses the story of Abraham going to sacrifice Isaac on the mountain. And the thing is it all relates back to him creating his covenant with God. And that covenant saying, well, if you believe in me, and if you actually believe in me, nothing, and have faith in me, nothing will bad will come to you. So, he goes up to the mountain, doesn't have to sacrifice his son, and no harm really comes to him. But that's only because he had faith in him. And what Kierkegaard boils this down to is that if you have faith, you will truly act upon it.
And I think that's one of the key things that can get missed. It's the acting upon it is what reinforces and confirms that faith. And then it's like from us, the Marxists, who have material analysis of things, when you perform something, that then ripples out to other people, and then they will experience those actions. It's so insidious. It happens so unconsciously beneath the surface.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I haven't gotten to reading any Kierkegaard yet, but like, he's definitely on the list.
Oh, dude, I only read Fear and Trembling by him, but I am in love with him. I need to get back to reading him. The way he writes, there's just something about it. I can't explain it, but I love how he words things. And you can really feel his emotions in it, because Kierkegaard to me is a very emotional person. So you can really feel through his words how he's writing.
Yeah. And it's what tiny little sidebar, but there was not really a question, but more kind of like a disgruntled frustration from one of my chatters earlier, where it was you need to have read a shit ton of theory to be a good leftist. Seems a bit gatekeepy to me. One of the things that I immediately want to dispel is you don't need to have read a shit ton of theory to be a good leftist. The reason I encourage people to read theory is so that you can speak to other theory heads, and you can say a lot more using a lot less words. So it means you can have like heavier conversations that have a lot more substance to them in less words, because there's just like, it's the point of reading a lot of these books. You can say, well, like Lenin said in State and Revolution, and then you can sum up like a 4-hour conversation in one chapter. But the actual act of like being a leftist and doing the actual work itself, like Marx very clearly put forward the idea that you feel your alienation. So if you do something that alleviates that, there's an intuitive sense to it. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're leaning in that direction, you're being a leftist. It's a tweet that I put up earlier that you actually liked and retweeted earlier, where it's like the role of theory is just to contextualize your actions. The action itself is what makes you a leftist.
Right. Hang on, I just want to read that tweet.
Oh, take your time.
Okay,
take your time.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm kind of a boomer. I haven't had a computer in like a year. That's one of the reasons I haven't been uploading very well. But yeah, the role of the Marxist intellectual is not to lead the masses, but is to contextualize their actions, as to equip them with the understanding as to why they did what they did, is to contextualize their action as critique their material resistance to material oppression. That's true. I like that.
Yeah. I had somebody yesterday tell me that was very ends justify the means, and I was kind of like, it's descriptive. I'm literally not justifying action. We're saying we'll describe action. I was so lost what they were saying.
No, I've just, I've just kind of come, I don't know how to say this. Sorry, I've been a little tired.
Take your time.
But, I've just really come to despise the synthetic left in general, the way that they run things.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the term. I don't think I have the first-hand experience of it to have that same visceral reaction to it. Conceptually, I agree with the sentiment. This is one of the problems with lived experiences online. If you literally haven't experienced it, you just don't have that visceral objection to it.
No, you don't. You don't. I've, like, a lot of people ask me, why don't you go to more protests? Well, the thing is a lot of the protests around here, I think a lot of them are bought off by the cops. For example, I went to a Refuse Fascism event in Cleveland, and I swore I saw one of the event leaders handing off information to one of the cops, like jotting down, telling them what's going on here. So, a lot of it is either, the liberals don't want to have you at there, or it's being run by the cops. Very so often do you actually get a grassroots organized movement around here.
Yeah. I have a question from the chat just in terms of what is the synthetic left? What does the term mean?
The synthetic left refers to people who are basically, in one word, that they are woke. They don't understand leftism. They're very, I guess you could say, in the wider movement. They're in the movement, but not out in the masses. They don't really want to know theory. They want to lead the working class by themselves. The synthetic left is not going out into the masses, pretending you know what you know, and then yelling at other people for not knowing it. Basically armchair leftists.
Yeah. Genuine proper problem. The way I've often boiled it down is along the lines of that people who kind of, they like the aesthetics of leftism. They enjoy like the idea of what it could be, but their leftism is really channeled through. They're in no way trying to kind of like shed their liberal ideology, where it's like they're a leftist rather than understanding that that means you're part of a group. It's not an individual identity. Like, it's just. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think part of this comes down to alienation under late stage capitalism. People haven't been able to find themselves, so they find their identity through these groups, but they don't fully discover what these groups stand for. And instead, it's just an identity. A lot of it is really LARPing, because they are alienated. They don't have an actual identity. They haven't been able to, in their life, actually develop a real identity. I in part relate this to the Marvel movies. A lot of people find their identity with the Marvel movies, the characters from that, or some fictional character, because in some way they feel that this completes their incomplete idea. And that's the same thing I think that is happening here, is that these people, they find this movement, they find this ideology, and that they just fall into it because it completes their identity.
No, yeah, I completely get what you mean. And I think what's frustrating about it is because that feeling of like that, this kind of like fills in some of the pieces. The way I'd reword and it, like if I was to try like tell them what their experience was, I don't think anything's actually being filled in. What they've just done is they've noticed that emptiness. So it was a very visceral and like real feeling of alienation. So like that actual feeling itself is a good thing to like that's what class consciousness is. The problem is that they then just don't take that to its conclusion and keep looking in the direction of trying to see what else is contributing to this alienation. They almost like they cut the head off the snake and they kind of says, okay, I've done enough. I'm healed. I can't think of a proper analogy, but it's like they're close and then at the last moment they turn away. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
It reminds me like about a year ago when I was having a conversation with Hakeem, it was one of the things that I'd noticed that kind of like I don't necessarily mind the LARPing. I do think it's harmless in a lot of cases. It doesn't do anything that frustrates me, but I think it's a behavior that you see in the West a lot because of the absolute stranglehold capital ideology has in the West, that there is very little we can actively do. Now there is, but they're just not doing it. But it's just that every now and then they'll just find a release valve, and the LARPing does that for them. That was one of the things that I'd noticed a lot, and that there are more constructive ways of reaching for those release valves. Like one of them is join an org, get into your communities and just like set up a communal garden, like tiny little things that help bring communities together. And then while you're doing that, ask them what their what are they dealing with.
Sorry, I'm still kind of tired. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. There is a very disconnect between quote unquote leftists and being out, like I said, go out, get out of the movement, into the masses. There is a very big disconnect. For example, is I have friends who are in very lower income areas, basically lumpen areas. And when you talk to these people, they are completely on board with what you're doing, especially since you're helping out the community. You fully understand what's going on. And one of the ways I've understood this is from the drug epidemic that we've been having here in America. They like to try to play it down now because it's died off a little bit, but it's still as bad as usual. And here in America, we have a very bad drug epidemic in very low income areas. Which is funny because a lot of these areas used to be very petty bourgeois, but over time the factories are left, and you know how that goes.
Yeah.
But I relate this back to a study done on Vietnam veterans coming back. A lot of Vietnam veterans were actually hooked on drugs, but when they got into a better environment, they just stopped doing drugs. And that goes back to your environment, affecting how you feel, act, and do. I really think that, if we start changing things, if we actually start working with people, things are going to look better.
Oh, 100%. Because it's spiritual leaning people have been leaning into like the role of drugs for a long time, and one of the things that I do identify with kind of Eastern philosophy in the regard is that like the role ego plays sometimes. The point of drugs to a lot of people is to the way I put it is like to dissociate from your ego, which is one of the things that alienation does is it just focuses everything through your individual identity and your ego. So like if life is fucking painful and you just want to stop being you for a while, drugs are a really good way of doing that temporarily. But if life isn't a shit, you don't need to do that.
No, it isn't. And the thing is, I had a really good friend who started using meth because, life was absolutely shit for him.
Yeah.
He was still stuck with his parents, and life wasn't going his way. It wasn't so much that he was still stuck with his parents, but his cars were always breaking down. He's working these ungodly hours, and one party he goes to, all of a sudden, he's no longer the guy I knew. He's just another meth head. That's sad. I've lost a friend to drugs.
Yeah.
But to sum it up for everything, I'm done with capitalism. I've seen my friends die. I've seen my friends die because they can't afford the proper treatments that they would need. So they're on life support. They could have been saved, but the families would never have recovered from it. So it's better. Well, he lived a full life. Let's just pull the plug now. Or my friends are completely alienated, and some of them die off of whatever meth or whatever, and they're still living, and you see them and you can tell that they're on something. I'm just 100% done. I'm tired of seeing my coworkers come in regretting life when there's more to life to live. I am tired of seeing old friends who are on something that we used to have something there. Altogether, I am just done, Zahn Zee.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it ties into what you were saying earlier, which is like getting out of the movement and getting into the masses and reaching out to help people, because I was about to make a prescriptive statement, but I don't actually know what to do. I'm not vain enough to think I have any idea what to do. Do you have any ideas?
Well, personally, I'm thinking about rejoining the PSL or the PCUSA. I've heard that originally I was a PCUSA Politburo member, and we are doing some real minor organizing.
Okay.
But there was a very right opportunist that got kicked out for suggesting new ideas. The PSL, I originally left because there's a lot of left opportunism. But the thing is, I feel like I'm at a point where I have to, do something. It's getting worse. We have to organize together no matter what our tendencies are, and form organizations or join organizations, because shit's about to hit the fan, I feel.
Yeah, it's it reminds me of I haven't read the full essay, but I read an extract from the essay. It was one of Lenin's essays talking about what to do with reactionary unions and should they be involved in the struggle. It's not a one-to-one correlation with what you're experiencing, but there's enough of a parallel where he was arguing that like the reactionary opportunist examples in like the upper stages of those unions, you have to compete with them and get in because that's where people are, and you can't get out because that hurts the people. You have to get stuck in, and you have to actually argue the cases because the stakes are just too high.
Oh, yeah, and I think one of the things that we can do in workforces is a lot of the unions I've been in, actually all the unions I've been in, they're very much just lackeys for the bosses. They don't do anything. And for example, I was working at a steel factory in Worcester, Ohio. And you notice right off the bat, one of the first things you notice is a lot of people are walking around with missing fingers. Granted, Jesus. You think, oh, the union's going to do something about this. And no, in fact, in your union contract, it says you are not allowed to strike. Basically, they're just collecting money and just vaguely threatening the bosses. And in another union I was in a sailors union. I'm not going to say exactly which one. But you know, we'd always experienced some unsafe condition or some psychotic bosun that's like that's the leader of the deck crew. For example, I remember I was up in a metal basket painting the top of the bridge, and a lightning storm comes in. He goes, "It's just some lightning. Keep going." And I really think, from my experience in that, is we need to work to radicalize these people and say this is not how a union is supposed to be.
Yeah.
I think that we need to kick out the right opportunist unions that are just going to keep how things are at the moment. We need to kick those guys out, and we need to form revolutionary unions and start building movements off of that, turn those unions into councils, and eventually just keep pushing until, you know, we've hit a point where we need to overthrow the bourgeoisie.
100%. It's like two things to that. One of the things I've started noticing, especially in Ireland, like our unions are, Jesus, I fucking hate them. There's legislation in Ireland from 1991 that you can't join sympathy strikes. We've been completely declawed.
Whoa.
Yeah, completely declawed. I don't think you can do like spontaneous strikes either. Like the unions in this country, the way I put it is they exist to protect the job, not the worker, because capitalists need jobs. They just don't care who is the worker. So
I 100% agree with that sentiment. You know, they're there just to keep basically the union at the steel factory I was working at. Basically, their main goal was just, you know, okay, this one line got automated 2 years ago. This line can't get automated. We're here just to protect this job. Meanwhile, the company has over $200,000 in OSHA fines, and they're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, fuck's sake. And like the second thing is this is one of the things I absolutely love about the IWW, because like one of their main targets is to get people who are involved in unions, bring them into the IWW to be trained in kind of like how to then go back to their unions to radicalize and not militarize them, to make them more like a militant in terms of actually, it's like, one, they're not getting their rights. Two, once they do start getting their rights, don't like never. There's the thing that I often say, like, as a leftist, never settle. Agree to the concession and then immediately move past it and keep demanding more. This is one of the things that the IWW is really good at, and it's just trying to re-radicalize the unions, because like you mentioned James Connolly earlier. One of the people Connolly worked with in the north of Ireland was Jim Larkin. It's either Jim or James, one of the two. Like one of the huge things about kind of like their unions was that idea of like actively campaigning for a definite increase in your rights, and like the union begrudgingly spoke to the employer because they needed to. Like they didn't exist to serve the employer. And one of the key things about Irish history was a period called like the Dublin and Belfast lockouts, where because people were joining unions, the employers locked out the employees and basically said, "We're not letting you back in unless you leave the union." Nowadays, like you won't get hired unless you join the company union. It kind of shows you where it shows you what happened to unions over like the space of the last 120 years, and like they became careerists and opportunists. Yeah.
Oh, they did. The one sailors union I joined, it's actually part of a larger steelworkers union. However, this is just mainly their sailors union for sailors on the Great Lakes. And the first thing I had to do when I joined as part of their new agreement solution is you have to join the union. It's this or nothing, and you're not getting this job unless you want to join this union.
Yeah. And because like a lot of unions, what they end up just doing is they operate in kind of like a managerial position where they're a person between you and the owner. So the person who actually has all the power never needs to leave the ivory tower to come down to the plebs.
Oh, no, they don't. I mean, like, for example, like I was telling you, the one factory I was working at had $200,000 in OSHA fines. And literally, what did they do to show solidarity? They gave us T-shirts and said, okay, problem solved. Let's go back to work, guys.
Yeah. And because like the reason why I like heavily push for like unions and like things like general strikes, like actual general strikes. We can't just call one and then 3 people in a business walk out. You need to have mass organization for these things to work. One of the reasons why I push for those ideas is because we're actually running out of time for like an industrial worker to have power, because once automation really kicks in, like the greatest weapon that the proletariat has is their ability to withdraw labor. If they don't need that labor, well, then unions are a defunct concept.
And I think that goes back to something that Huey P. Newton was talking about, I think in the late 60s. And when he was announcing the new theory of intercommunalism, which I feel everyone in this chat should go look into. But when he was talking about his theory of intercommunalism, he was also talking about how the workplace is becoming more and more automated. And basically how I've contextualized this is that in the next 10 to 30 years, somewhere in between that, we're not going to have neoliberal capitalism anymore. We're going to have technocratic capitalism, in which technocrats run the means of production, and we have absolutely nothing to do with that. Hopefully, the most hopeful instance in that is that we're pushed into service sector jobs. I know that sounds depressing, but that's the thing that's what we're facing right now at the moment.
Yeah, it had never occurred to me to call it technocratic capitalism, but that pulled together so many different strands of thoughts I've had. That's exactly what I'm worried about. Have you ever heard of a YouTuber called Robert Miles by any chance?
No, I have not. Can you please inform me?
He does like AI security and safety. My sister is a computer games graduate, and she had worked on like AI. She's fascinated by AI. She had discovered Robert Miles just in passing. It wasn't related to leftism. He released a video, and suddenly he was talking about kind of like workers need to preserve their ability to extract demands from employers, and automation is going to significantly reduce the ability for the working class to be able to kind of like exercise their control of societies. And then she just messaged me and says, holy shit, he's a comrade, but he never once described socialism. I did a whole video about how basically it's the man was spreading class consciousness without ever letting you know what he was doing. And I just thought that was genius. But he was talking about the problem that is technocratic capitalism, because it's like technocracy it's sexy. That's the problem. Everyone loves Elon
sexy,
Musk and they don't know why.
Sexy.
Yeah.
So, that's how it draws people in. I need to reread Technocracy because I'm writing a big, long book. I kind of want it to be a semi-blueprint for the left, but, I'm researching a lot of ideas, and that's one of the things that the theories I pulled together is what's the next stage of capitalism, technocratic capitalism. So, I really need to reread that, but, continue what you were saying.
Oh, no bother, yeah, because it's you're raising exactly an issue that I think it's under-raised, and it's the idea that something will come after neoliberalism, because if there's one thing COVID has done, it shatters the false consciousness around neoliberalism, because suddenly a lot of people were noticing how totally atomized they were, and neoliberalism was essentially trying to commodify that sense of meaninglessness in society. Like, that's very quickly going to lose its ability to continually producing profits. So capitalism, if it wants to sustain itself as the dominant mode of production, it's going to need to find a new ideology, because like liberalism died with the Haitian Revolution. Like, we've been living off of this zombified joke of a concept of what liberalism is. Very convenient for capitalists, but completely like it's like Rousseau and everybody, we've turned in their fucking graves with saw what actually happened to liberalism. It's just vainly one, but after neoliberalism comes the apocalypse. That's what technocratic capitalism will be, because you'll have like 7 people owning a fleet of robots. It's like, I think one thing we forget about as well, what happens if you automate the military?
I don't know, man. Black Ops 2 kind of had the answer for that too, man, and I've been, ever since I played that video game, I've been kind of scared of AI ever since.
Oh yeah.
But one of the scariest things I heard about when I was out sailing is we had a guy who used to do container shipping, and my field, my part of the maritime field is completely different. We put iron ore into container holds down below deck, and we ship it off, whereas all their cargo is on top of the deck. Well, he was from I don't know exactly what he was doing. I think he was doing container shipping, but he was telling me about how on the ship he was on out there, that there was literally a guy parking it in Russia from a live satellite feed, and the captain had to do absolutely nothing. And this just kind of blew me away. That this is what's the future. This is what the future is going to be like, and it really scares me, because the thing is I love sailing, but what happens when I plan on getting a tugboat job in the future once everything opens up. What happens when they can just through satellite control the tugboat and I'm not needed anymore?
Yeah, fucks Jesus. And what's crazy is because there's two aspects of dissonance being attacked here. First of all, nothing about what you've said is exclusively a bad thing. That is an incredible feat of technology that can really help societies. And then the dissonance is, why is this threatening people's ability to actually be human beings? Because like you said, like you'd love to go and be kind of like a tugboat captain. Why couldn't you still go do that? The fact that nobody's willing to pay you, that just seems like a massive fuck up on the part of society. That like if there's one of the things, I can't remember the passage Marx put it in, but it's along the idea like that, like working will become vocation as opposed to occupation, where like you'll wake up and you'll be fuck it, I feel like fishing today, I want to contribute to the fish stock. After that I might be a carpenter later. It's the idea that you work to fulfill yourself, not to fulfill some other person's bank sheet. The fact that you're going to lose this because it'll be more profitable to use technology, that like the technology should serve people, not the other way around. That's fundamentally how I feel about it.
And this goes back to the documentary. Right now, I don't know if I'm fully going to do it, but in some way, I'm going to express the idea. But I remember growing up of just how optimistic technology was. But then all of a sudden, and the idea was the computer and internet revolution will bring down dictatorships. It will revolutionize the way we live, but it's been the exact opposite. It's been used to track us. It's been used to oppress us, the way we think. Because there's a YouTuber, I forget his name, but he does just like random informational videos. And one of the scariest things he says is that AI basically has a bias. It is programmed with a bias that is going to feed you through ads and the content that you see. So I know this gets thrown around a lot, but everything is kind of like a Black Mirror episode anymore, or a 1984 Orwellian nightmare. If there's one time period I could really just go back to, I would like to go back to pre-2014 America, because there is still that optimism around. There was still that technological optimism, because I got my first iPod Touch. I could access droves of information, but in the same instance, it's not what it was supposed to be. Capitalism, I feel, has really corrupted that technological revolution, and really, I want to see technology put towards using it towards having us reach another stage of society in which we can fulfill ourselves.
Yeah, this is why I want to read Capital as soon as I get the ability to, because I've heard this being said a few times. I've heard a few different Marxists say it, and I fundamentally believe it. I just can't explain it. It's that like the commodity form and the commodification of data is what fundamentally destroyed technology's ability to be of service to people. We're a service to it. The entire backbone of like Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, they sell you a stage so that you can freely give them billions of dollars worth of data so that they can just trade it amongst themselves in case they need it. They're literally inventing money out of nowhere, and then God knows how this will be used against you. And it's just that really annoying part of like the fact that got commodified. That was the issue. Oh, geez. Oh, it drives me nuts.
Nothing is sacred under capitalism.
100%, yeah. Because it's like that sense of optimism you were speaking about. That is, I completely feel what you're saying in terms of like that sense of optimism. It's so fleeting. It still exists out there. You can still get excited about things. And it's holding on to dear life the things that excite you, because you're kind of like, holy shit, there's still things that excite me, where I can see society maybe having like a silver lining somewhere, but then you realize that silver lining was actually just a crack in a giant boot,
and it's going to get commodified later.
Yeah. How many people bought a Che Guevara t-shirt? It's the commodification of struggle. And it's that vaguely loops back to the idea I was saying earlier about, like, because of just how much of a stranglehold capitalism has on us in the West, LARPing is the only way we have to release the tension and the pressure. Otherwise we get horrendously depressed. So that's why I don't hate the LARPing. I just wish that they would relieve their stress in much more productive ways. Like, I don't know, hand out food to striking picket workers. Just do something that gives you that same sense of community and rush and adrenaline, but in a way that actively helps people.
Well, then they wouldn't be earning their Reddit updates for the day. So I don't know how much that would work for them.
It's it reminds, there's two phrases. One, the revolution will not be streamed on Twitch. That's one that I love, and it's understanding like that. Like what I'm doing right now is I'm literally I'm educating myself and I'm educating my audience. I'm just giving them exposure to different ideas, because you could say something that is their experience in a way that they never thought about before. So they will then take that with them out of the internet. Like, they'll take that into the real world. Everything we're doing right now is in service of offline. To quote the great wise people of Twitter, get the fuck off Twitter.
I don't know. What do you think of Black Lives Matter right now? Do you feel that that's going to devolve into a liberal movement that's going to become, commodified and everything, or do you feel that it's going to turn into something revolutionary?
My honest answer is a complete cop-out. It's so far removed from my lived circumstances, because I'm white, working class Irish living in Ireland. Nothing about. I
understand that. I understand that.
No, what I mean is that nothing about their struggle I can actually relate to, so I have no idea what's going to happen to it. From the outside, I see elements of class struggle, but not enough. That's the critique I have sometimes. I just have to watch and see. I don't have an answer, unfortunately.
I think a lot of it is just the identity politics movement. I've been to a Black Lives Matter protest, and I support it. But the thing is with books like Settlers coming out and this all anti-whitey politics, I think that the Black working class should start reaching out. And, I understand how this comes from me being a white guy saying this. But the thing is should start also reaching out to the impoverished white working class. Because it's funny, because even in poverty, there still seems to be a lot of segregation involved. And I think that, they should reach out and fight, because the thing is I have seen white working class ghettos, and granted they're extremely bad, but they're nowhere near as bad as Black working class ghettos. But I think that they should come together and organize and start making an actual class movement. Then again, I think that comes down to being one of the advanced proletariat, as Lenin put it, and that we need to get out there and start teaching people about this stuff, and actually bring them together.
Solidarity across the board is the way I look at it. It might be the circles I run in, but that's the sentiment that I tend to hear from my Black comrades that are Marxists involved in BLM, where they're basically saying that this is being led by Black communities simply because this is a Black experience. So they're responding to something that Black communities experience, but they don't consider it an exclusively Black protest. They're just protesting something happening to Black people. It's a working class struggle. I completely agree with you. It's so far removed from my experiences that I don't know the struggle. That's the problem.
Well, the thing is, I've seen part of it. I had a African-American friend. We went to the same career center. So his background is that his mom was white and somewhat lower middle class, but his dad's side of the family, they are bloods in the drug trade in East Side Akron. So his mom took him out of that and brought him to the career center. And I remember I was hanging out with him one day, and he's like, man, and he asked me, do you want to know what it's like living in the black community? I like, yes, I want to know what it's like. So he drives me up to East Side Akron, which is like the main, I guess you could say, ghetto in Akron, Ohio. And he takes me there and he shows me the projects that he grew up in. And it was terrifying, not like, the setting, but the way that the projects were set up is that there is literally a chain link like gate out front, and it's all gated so that when the cops come, they can just bust people on just for like quotas. Like they could have an impending charge and then they just come and clean house. It's almost like a Gestapo raid coming through there.
Yeah. It's that the communities themselves, like the physical structures, the way it was built was to facilitate like the imposition of law and order on them, as opposed to like the liberal lie we're told that law and order to serve them.
Oh, definitely. And if you don't know this, policing in America actually does originate from slave catchers. For example, many cities did not have public police services until right about, I think, up until slavery ended. And then all of a sudden these slave catchers are like, well, what are we going to do? We'll become cops.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I really do agree with defund the police, but I agree more with that is that we need to change how policing works. And in order to do that, we need to change the superstructure of society. I'm not 100% on board with, in socialism, especially in the early stages, we won't have police. But, I think that if we can change the superstructure, we'll be able to take away the colonialism that this country has been founded on and just change everything.
It's like one of the best things I ever did was read Lenin's State and Revolution. The day after the revolution, society will be the exact same because it'll still be dripping with the liberal ideology through which it was brought up with. But what will have changed was the people directing the repressive forces of the state will they will no longer be directing those forces against the working class. They'll be directed against the proletariat, not against the bourgeoisie. The general
class traitor here, huh?
The general bigotries of the ordinary people will still survive because that's ideology. Like, never get removed from Gramsci's work of pointing out how cultural hegemony informs how you feel about the struggle itself and how you feel about your identity within your societies. It can take 2 to 3 generations for that to change. That was, like, for me, that was one of the greatest things that Lenin put forward. It's the idea that we've no idea how long that transition will take because we need to fundamentally reorganize a society's relationship to itself, because like it might be a proletarian state, but it won't be a proletarian ideology, because that ideology needs to be like carefully curated and worked on so that people can start seeing each other as people and not as means to accumulating wealth. So like it's like we're going to have police. The point is the police won't be organized to oppress people. Like that's the key element attached to it here. I agree with you like that. Like, again, I'm removed from the struggle, so I don't want to put forward ideas behind it. The way I've heard like defunding the police being explained to me is to put pressure on those cities, meaning that they just need to deal with their budgets better. Like they can't just militarize. They don't like spend their surplus on getting like better equipment. Or like even it's to force them to engage. Or like even one of the classic ones is take resources away from police to put them into other situations, like first aid responders, like psychological help responders. Like if a homeless man is like choking on the ground, you don't need police for that. You need paramedics. Like, do you get what I mean?
Yeah, and I understand what you're talking about. I've been trying to get into firefighting for a while, but COVID has really put
Yeah,
an end to
100%.
that.
Yeah.
But I was listening to a podcast with a firefighter, and they're talking about Devil's Night, for which, my non-American viewers, if you don't know what that is, it started in Detroit when all the factories started closing down. People realized, if I torch my home, I'm going to get the insurance money off of that, and I can leave here. Well, they're talking about they're talking to a union leader and a lieutenant in the Detroit Fire Department about, just how money in the city is being spent. And I think one of the things he brought up is just how corrupt the city is, and they're putting it all towards the police to enforce, their corruption. In fact, he was even saying, if I get wiped out in an ATM, just know I was broke. Like, that's how bad it is with, like, these police and everything.
Because, like, that's the essence of how I've heard defund the police explained to me. It's to take that funding and put it towards the other areas to kind of like aid society. That current like a lot of situations, police come to brutalize somebody, not to actually assist them. So it's to remove, the freedom of their ability to do that sort of thing. That's how I've heard it being explained to me. But I sometimes hear of people talking about like totally unpoliced societies. Again, the issue I have with this is because we're 150, nearly 200 years into liberal capitalist ideology. That won't just go away. You need to change the institutions. You need to cultivate a working class ideology.
And I think a lot of the left doesn't really know its identity. Like, they say, yes, I'm a communist, but in reality, a lot of the aesthetics of the left that they take are these very utopian anarchist ideologies. A lot of the left thinks, oh, after the revolution, everything's going to be fine. They don't realize is that the second class struggle is going to come after that.
Oh, yeah.
There's still going to be reactionaries. I mean, even in the Soviet Union, well into like the Brezhnev era, they were still dealing with anti-Semitism, because Russia had been dealing with anti-Semitism from years, coming from the Russian Orthodox Church. I think, in fact, the state film agency, I forget what it was called, put out a very anti-Semitic movie in 1973. And to think that, reactionaries are just going to, disappear, it's very anarchistic, or at least utopian.
Yeah. I need to read more anarchist literature so that I can be informed about the agreement or the disagreement. But I completely agree with you in the sense of like that, like after the revolution happens, it'll reorganize the class dynamic, because like the most important thing that came out of historical materialism to me was the idea that what drives history is competing class interests and how they relate to the means of production. One of the things that what drives me nuts is because like proletariat and bourgeoisie are not the only classes. They were just the two dominating the class struggle of like Marx's time. They were what was like dominating, like what came out of the French Revolution was the entire social structure split between those competing interests. They weren't the only interests. That was just the dominant class struggle. Once that's resolved and you turn the apparatus of the state towards crushing the bourgeoisie, once you resolve that class conflict, if there are other class antagonisms within society, they will emerge, and we'll have to address those as well. The term I have in my head is continual revolution. I think that's an Engels term, so I need to read up on it. I'm not 100% sure.
Oh no, I agree with you. It's just like have you ever listened to David Rovics before?
No, I don't know the name.
I brought this up in the stream with Kayla Maupin a night or two ago, and David Rovics has a song called Revolutions. It's either called After Revolution, but he's talking about just how rosy it's going to be, how perfect everything's going to be. We're going to stop making bombs to send off to the Middle East, but it's very divorced from what a real revolution looks like and what's going to happen after it. I think people think of revolution as, we're just going to kick out the bourgeoisie. They don't understand, that there is a lot of bloodshed involved. You're going to have to probably stand up to, in some sense, to your own family members, because they're probably going to be defending the counter revolution. I don't, yeah.
I take the position that we don't know what form revolution will take. Personally, I think liberal ideology has done an extraordinary job of instilling false consciousness to the degree where I'm like right now the odds of revolution are almost impossible. Like capitalism has done a stellar job of suppressing us. So like before we even talk about revolution, I think we need to get people into a position where they even see revolution as an option. And then once revolution happens, I've no idea what that's going to look like. And it reminds me of Lenin's critique of like what communism will look like. We're so far removed from those conditions that to predict it is almost a guarantee we'll be wrong. Bit
Exactly.
of a cop out cheat answer, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, how much longer are you looking to do this? I don't mean to sound rude. But,
no. I was just about to say that we're almost an hour and a half in, so it's completely up to yourself. You've said you're tired a few times, so if you've run into here, I don't mind.
Yeah, I need to really get going. I got other stuff I need to do today. I need to accomplish a lot, but I would love to do this again.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I'd love to do this again. It was great to be on here. Do you think I can get a audio file for this or a video of this so I could post it on my own channel?
Yeah. What I'll do is that I'm gonna rip the Twitch VOD and put it on YouTube. So what I'll do is I'll just send you the audio extract from it.
All right. I think I got what you said. Connection got interrupted, but
sorry. Yeah, I can send you the audio. No problem at all.
All right. Well, it's been great talking to you.
Not about it.
Salute.
Not about it. Before you go, do you want to just shout people out, let them know where you can find you?
Oh yeah, I am RedScare TV on YouTube. I screwed up my Twitter handle, so I am RedScare T. I also, if you poke through my community tab or my About Me tab in my YouTube, you'll probably be able to find my Discord's chat. It's the best place to get a hold of me. I despise Facebook, so I do not have a Facebook page. So that's how you can find me.
Yeah, I just use Facebook to talk to relatives. I hate the platform otherwise. But yeah, not about it, my friend. I've enjoyed having you on to discuss, especially in terms of like the role of theory in terms of contextualizing struggle so that we recognize it when it happens.
All right. Well, it's been great talking to you, Zahn Zee.
And not about a RedScare. Thanks a million.
All right. Red salute.
Red salute. Bye-bye.
If you would like to chat with RedScare TV, you can hit me up on my Twitter at RedScareT or on my Discord, which is in the link. Thank you for watching RedScare TV.